The pack leader's cubs were fading until the human medic stepped in. The morning mist clung to the crystalline towers of Kethvar like ghostly fingers, but pack leader Vorthak paid no attention to the beauty of his homeworld. His massive frame, standing nearly 3 meters tall and covered in silver-gray fur that marked him as an elder of the Thylorian race, trembled with barely contained anguish. Behind him, in the sacred nursery chambers carved from living stone, his cubs lay dying. The Thylorians had ruled the Andorian sector for over 2 millennia, their pack-based society built on strength, honor, and the fierce protection of their young. Each generation, the pack leaders would gather their strongest cubs to form the next wave of warriors and leaders. But this generation was different. This generation was failing. Vorthak's eldest advisor, Krathen, approached with his head lowered in the traditional gesture of respect, but also of mourning. His usually proud ears were flattened against his skull, and his golden eyes held a pain that mirrored his leader's own. "Pack leader," Krathen's voice was barely above a whisper. "We have lost 3 more during the night. The disease spreads faster than our healers can understand." The massive alien's claws extended involuntarily, scoring deep grooves in the stone floor. In the past month, 27 cubs from various packs had succumbed to the mysterious ailment. It began with a simple loss of appetite, then progressed to weakness, difficulty breathing, and finally, a slow fade into death that no Thylorian medicine could prevent. "What do our gene singers say?" Vorthak asked, referring to their most skilled biological specialists. "They are confused, my leader. The cubs show no signs of infection, no cellular damage that they can identify. Their life force simply weakens, as if something is drawing it away grain by grain." Vorthak's mate, Sienna, emerged from the nursery chamber. Her usually pristine white fur was unkempt, her eyes red from sleepless nights watching over their remaining young. She carried the weight of every mother's nightmare, the inability to protect her children from an invisible enemy. "The youngest male barely feeds," she reported, her voice steady but strained. "His breathing grows more labored with each passing hour. If we cannot find answers soon—" She did not need to finish. They all understood. The future of their pack, perhaps their entire species, hung in the balance. It was then that Subcommander Zillith entered the chamber, her communication device glowing with an incoming transmission. As one of the few Thylorians who had embraced interspecies cooperation, she had been tasked with maintaining contact with other races in their sector. "Pack leader, forgive my interruption, but we have received a response to our emergency broadcast." Vorthak's ears perked forward, the first sign of hope he had shown in days. "From whom?" "The human colony ship Ascendant. They are 3 days out and have a medic aboard who specializes in xenobiology." A rumble of skepticism passed through the chamber. Humans were still relatively new to the galactic community, barely 3 centuries since first contact. While they had proven themselves surprisingly adaptable and innovative, they were still considered young and inexperienced by most established races. "A human?" Krathen's tone carried the doubt they all felt. "What could a human know of our biology? They have only recently begun to understand their own." But Vorthak was desperate, and desperation made even the proudest pack leader consider options he might otherwise dismiss. "What else did they say?" Zillith hesitated before responding. "The medic requested access to our medical data, biological samples, and permission to examine our cubs directly." The chamber fell silent. In Thylorian culture, allowing an outsider, especially a non-pack member, to touch their young was almost unthinkable. It went against every instinct they possessed. Sienna spoke first, her voice cutting through the cultural taboos like a blade. If this human can save our children, then let them come. My mate, Vorthak began, but she silenced him with a look that held the fury of every grieving mother. I have held 3 cubs as they died, Vorthak. 3. I will not hold a 4th because we were too proud to accept help. The pack leader looked around the chamber, seeing the same desperate hope in every face. His own cubs were dying, and traditional medicine had failed them utterly. Sometimes, he realized, strength meant admitting weakness. Send word to this human ship, he decided. Tell them we accept their assistance, and prepare the council. We may be making history, for better or worse. As the transmission was sent, Vorthak returned to the nursery where his 3 remaining cubs lay in their crystalline beds, their breathing shallow and labored. The youngest, barely 6 months old, opened his golden eyes and looked up at his father with a trust that broke the mighty leader's heart. Hold on, little warrior, Vorthak whispered, gently stroking the cub's soft fur. Help is coming. Strange help, perhaps, but help nonetheless. The next 3 days passed like a slow agony. 2 more cubs from neighboring packs succumbed to the mysterious ailment, bringing the total deaths to 29. The Thylorian healers worked frantically, trying every traditional remedy and several experimental treatments, but nothing slowed the disease's progression. Meanwhile, reports came in about the human ship. The Ascendant was indeed approaching, but it was unlike any vessel the Thylorians had encountered. Rather than the sleek, purposeful designs favored by most spacefaring races, the human ship appeared to be a hodgepodge of different technologies and modifications. It looked like it had been rebuilt dozens of times, each edition serving some specific function that wasn't immediately apparent. It resembles a pack leader's den, Crathen observed, studying the scanned images. Functional, adapted to need, but without formal beauty. On the morning of the 3rd day, the Ascendant entered orbit around Kethvar. The human captain, a weathered woman named Elena Vasquez, opened communication channels and requested immediate permission to land near the nursery complex. Our medic is Dr. James Chen, Captain Vasquez explained, her image somewhat distorted by the translation matrix. He's worked with 17 different species and has a particular talent for unconventional solutions. He's requesting immediate access to patients and medical data. Vorthak himself responded, his massive form filling the communication screen. Dr. Chen has our permission to examine our young. But understand, human, if your medic brings harm to my cubs, I will personally tear your ship apart with my bare claws. To his surprise, Captain Vasquez smiled. A human expression he had learned indicated amusement or approval. Dr. Chen would be disappointed if you felt any differently, pack leader. He's got cubs of his own back on New Terra. He understands. An hour later, Vorthak stood in the landing bay as the human shuttle touched down. The craft was small, barely large enough for 3 beings, and it moved with the quick precision that seemed to characterize all human technology. When the hatch opened, Dr. James Chen emerged, and Vorthak felt his first moment of doubt about this decision. The human was tiny, barely reaching Vorthak's chest, with graying hair and kind eyes, behind strange lenses that enhanced his vision. He carried a single bag and moved with the quick, efficient steps of someone accustomed to working in unfamiliar environments. But it was what the human did next that surprised the pack leader. Instead of the formal greeting protocols favored by most species, Dr. Chen simply looked up at Vorthak and said, "Take me to them. Every minute matters." There was no ceremony, no cultural exchange, no diplomatic pleasantries. Just the simple, direct urgency of someone who understood that children were dying. Vorthak found himself liking this strange little human already. "This way," he said, turning toward the nursery. "And Dr. Chen, thank you for coming." The human medic was already pulling strange instruments from his bag as they walked. "Thank me when they're better, pack leader. Thank me when they're better." Dr. James Chen entered the nursery chamber and immediately knelt beside the nearest crystalline bed, his practiced eyes already assessing the patient. The Thylorian cub was roughly the size of a human toddler, covered in soft gray fur that should have been lustrous, but instead appeared dull and lifeless. Its breathing was shallow and irregular, and its golden eyes held the glassy look of severe illness. "How long since symptoms first appeared?" Chen asked, already unpacking his diagnostic equipment. The instruments looked foreign to Thylorian eyes, sleek devices with glowing displays and flexible sensor arrays that seemed to move with their own purpose. 6 weeks ago, Crathen replied, keeping his voice low out of respect for the sleeping cubs. "Beginning with loss of appetite, then weakness, then this, fading." Chen nodded as he attached sensors to the cub's tiny form, his movements gentle but confident. "Any environmental changes? New foods? Different atmospheric conditions?" "Nothing," Sienna answered from across the chamber, where she watched over her own youngest. "We have examined everything. Their diet, their sleeping areas, the air quality, even the mineral content of their drinking water. Our gene singers found no contamination, no toxins, no infectious agents." The human medic's portable scanner hummed quietly as it worked, projecting holographic displays that meant nothing to the watching Thylorians. Chen frowned at the readouts, adjusting settings and scanning again. "Interesting," he murmured. "Your healers are right. There's no sign of infection or toxicity, but there's something else." He moved to the next bed, then the next, repeating his scans. With each examination, his frown deepened. After checking all 7 remaining cubs in the chamber, he sat back on his heels and stared at his data. "Dr. Chen?" Vorthak asked, his voice tight with worry. "What do you see?" "Something your people wouldn't have looked for," Chen replied, still studying his readings, "because it doesn't exist in Thylorian physiology." He looked up at the assembled aliens, his expression serious. "Tell me about your planet's sun. Specifically, its emission spectrum." Crathen stepped forward, confused by the question. "Kethvar Prime is a stable star, Doctor. It has provided consistent energy to our world for millions of years. Our astronomy records show no significant changes." "That's not what I'm asking," Chen said, standing and walking to the chamber's large window that looked out over the planetary surface. "I'm asking about specific wavelengths. Your sun, compared to most inhabited systems, emits relatively little in the ultraviolet range, correct?" "Yes," Zillith confirmed, accessing her datapad. "Our star is cooler than average. We have always considered this beneficial. Less radiation exposure, more stable climate patterns." Chen nodded grimly. "And that's exactly the problem." He turned back to face them, his expression mixing excitement with concern. "Your cubs aren't sick. They're starving. Specifically, they're suffering from severe vitamin D deficiency." The Thylorians exchanged bewildered glances. "Vitamin D?" Vorthak repeated the unfamiliar term. "A compound that most species synthesize when their skin is exposed to ultraviolet radiation," Chen explained, already reaching for his treatment case. "Humans discovered this centuries ago when our ancestors moved to regions with limited sunlight. Children would develop weak bones, poor immune systems, and eventually die from what we called rickets." Sienna's ears pricked forward in the Thylorian expression of sudden understanding. "But we have always lived under this sun. Why would our cubs suffer from something our people have never experienced?" "Because they're not getting any UV exposure at all," Chen said, gesturing toward the nursery's crystal walls. "These chambers are beautiful, but they filter out virtually all ultraviolet light, and your cubs spend their first year of life almost exclusively indoors." Crathen's claws extended involuntarily as he processed this information. "You are saying that our most protective instinct, keeping our young safe within the nursery, is killing them?" "In a sense, yes," Chen confirmed gently. "But there's more. I suspect this has been building for generations, possibly centuries. Each generation slightly more deficient than the last, but not enough to cause obvious symptoms until now. He activated a portable projection device, showing the Thylorians a simplified diagram of vitamin synthesis. What likely happened is that some environmental change, maybe increased atmospheric filtering, maybe changes in your building materials, maybe even evolutionary adaptation, has gradually reduced your species' ability to synthesize vitamin D. Your adult bodies can handle the deficiency because they're larger and have reserves built up over decades. But cubs, with their rapidly growing bodies and developing immune systems, need much higher levels. Vorthak felt a chill that had nothing to do with temperature. How long have we been unknowingly weakening our own offspring? Impossible to say without extensive genetic analysis, Chen replied. But the good news is that this is completely treatable. I carry vitamin D supplements designed for multiple species physiologies. He opened his medical case and removed several small vials filled with clear liquid. This is a synthetic version that should be compatible with Thylorian biochemistry. But I'll need to start with small test doses and monitor carefully. Test doses? Sienna's voice carried a mother's fear. You mean you are not certain this will work? Chen met her eyes directly, and the Thylorians were surprised by the depth of determination they saw there. I'm certain of the diagnosis. Your cub's blood chemistry, bone density readings, and immune markers all point to severe vitamin deficiency. As for the treatment, he paused, choosing his words carefully. Human medicine has learned that confidence without caution leads to dead patients. I won't lie to you. There's always risk when treating a species I've never worked with before. But the alternative is certain death. Vorthak made the decision that had been building since the human ship first arrived. Do it. Start with my youngest. Chen nodded and prepared a syringe with a carefully measured dose. As he approached the smallest cub, Sienna positioned herself nearby, her body language making it clear she would protect her offspring if anything went wrong. This might sting a little, Chen said softly, speaking to the cub as much as the parents. With practiced skill, he administered the injection and then attached a small monitoring device to track the patient's vital signs. Now we wait, he said. If my theory is correct, we should see improvement in energy levels within hours and measurable biochemical changes within a day. The next few hours passed with agonizing slowness. Chen moved between the cubs, taking regular readings and making notes in his personal log. The Thylorians watched his every movement, looking for signs of either hope or disaster. It was Sienna who noticed it first. He moved, she whispered, staring at her youngest cub. His breathing, it is stronger. Chen immediately scanned the cub and smiled, the first genuine smile the Thylorians had seen from him. Respiratory function is up 12%, he confirmed. Heart rate is stronger and more regular. The treatment is working. A collective sigh of relief echoed through the chamber, but Chen quickly raised a cautioning hand. One positive response doesn't guarantee success for all patients. Each cub may react differently, but this is definitely encouraging. Over the following hours, he administered carefully calculated doses to the other cubs, adjusting the formula based on each patient's size and condition. By evening, 5 of the 7 cubs were showing measurable improvement. The 2 most severely affected were responding more slowly, but even they showed stabilized vital signs. Doctor, Vorthak said as Chen continued his monitoring, our healers have studied for decades to understand Thylorian physiology. How did you recognize something they missed? Chen paused in his work, considering the question. Because humans are generalists, he said finally. Your gene singers are experts in your own species, which makes them incredibly skilled at treating typical Thylorian ailments. But this wasn't typical. This was something that could affect any species that evolved under specific environmental conditions. He gestured toward his equipment. Human medicine developed by necessity. We've lived on dozens of different worlds, each with unique challenges. We've learned to look beyond obvious causes because we've had to adapt to environments our bodies were never designed for. Sometimes being an outsider gives you perspectives that specialists miss. Crathen approached, his earlier skepticism replaced by something approaching awe. You saved our children by understanding them better than we understood ourselves. I saved your children by standing on the shoulders of thousands of human medics who came before me, Chen corrected, and by having access to medical knowledge from 17 different species. This isn't about humans being superior. It's about different approaches leading to different insights. As night fell over Kethvar, the nursery chamber held an atmosphere of cautious optimism. Cubs that had lain still and weak for weeks were beginning to move, to make soft sounds, even to show interest in food for the first time in memory. But Chen wasn't finished. As he continued his monitoring, he pulled Vorthak aside for a private conversation. Pack leader, we've treated the immediate crisis, but there's a larger problem we need to address, he said quietly. This deficiency has been building for generations. Even if we cure these cubs, the next generation will face the same problems unless we make fundamental changes. Vorthak's expression grew serious. What kind of changes? Environmental modifications to your nurseries, dietary supplements, possibly even some controlled exposure to UV radiation, Chen explained. This isn't just about medicine, it's about changing centuries-old cultural practices. The pack leader looked out at his recovering cubs, then back at the human medic who had already accomplished what seemed impossible. Dr. Chen, if you can show us how to protect our future young, you will have the eternal gratitude of every Thylorian pack. Chen smiled and returned to his patients. Let's focus on getting these little ones healthy first, then we'll worry about the future. But privately, he was already planning for that future, knowing that the hardest part of this mission might still lie ahead. 3 weeks after Dr. Chen's arrival, the nursery chamber had transformed from a place of quiet despair into one of joyful chaos. 7 healthy cubs tumbled and played across the crystalline floor, their fur lustrous and their golden eyes bright with the vitality that had been missing for so long. The youngest, who had been closest to death, now chased his siblings with the boundless energy that marked healthy Thylorian youth. Vorthak stood beside Chen, watching his offspring with an expression of wonder that hadn't faded since the first cub had fully recovered. I had forgotten what they sounded like when they truly played, he admitted, his voice thick with emotion. They're beautiful, Chen replied, making notes on his portable device. All their metabolic markers are in normal ranges now, but more importantly, they're acting like healthy children should. The success in Vorthak's nursery had spread throughout the Thylorian territories. Word of the human medic's miracle had reached every pack, and soon Chen found himself treating cubs across 3 star systems. The pattern was always the same: severe vitamin deficiency caused by evolutionary adaptation to reduced UV exposure, combined with cultural practices that further limited the essential radiation. But Chen hadn't stopped at treatment. True to his word to Vorthak, he had spent the intervening weeks working with Thylorian engineers and healers to design permanent solutions. The nursery chambers now featured specialized lighting systems that provided controlled UV exposure, carefully calibrated to Thylorian physiology. Dietary supplements had been developed using local plant sources, ensuring sustainability without dependence on human medical supplies. Dr. Chen, Crathen approached, carrying a datapad filled with reports from across their territory. The latest results from the outer colonies. Every treated cub shows complete recovery. The new nursery protocols have been implemented in 47 facilities. Chen nodded, but his expression remained serious. That's good news, but we still need to address the broader question. How did this deficiency develop in the first place? Over the past weeks, he had worked with Thylorian scientists to analyze historical medical records, atmospheric composition data, and even genetic samples from preserved artifacts. What they had discovered painted a troubling picture of gradual environmental change that had gone unnoticed for centuries. Sienna joined the group, her youngest cub riding on her shoulders in the traditional Thylorian manner. The sight of him healthy and playful never failed to bring a smile to Chen's face. "The atmospheric analysis results arrived this morning," she reported. "Your theory was correct, Dr. Chen. The industrial compounds we've been using to strengthen our building materials have been gradually filtering UV radiation from our environments. The change was so slow that our bodies adapted partially, but not completely." "How long?" Vorthak asked. "Nearly 800 years, she replied. "Each generation slightly more deficient than the last, until we reached a tipping point where our cubs could no longer survive." Chen shook his head in amazement. "Your species was experiencing evolutionary pressure in real time, but the change was so gradual that it went undetected. If this pattern had continued for another few generations, you might have lost the ability to reproduce entirely." The implications hung heavy in the air. The Thylorians, one of the most powerful and long-lived species in their sector, had been slowly heading toward extinction without realizing it. "There's something else," Zillith interrupted, approaching with urgent news. "We've received communications from the Hegemony Council. They want to speak with Dr. Chen directly." The Hegemony Council governed interspecies relations across 12 sectors, making decisions that affected billions of lives. For them to request direct communication with a single medic was unprecedented. Within hours, Chen found himself in the Thylorian Communication Center, facing holographic projections of representatives from 6 different species. The council chamber was an impressive sight. Beings of various shapes and sizes, from the crystalline Zephyrite to the aquatic Nereidans, all focused on the small human standing before them. "Dr. Chen," spoke Chancellor Vexthar, a tall being whose species Chen didn't recognize. "We have reviewed the reports from Thylorian space. You appear to have solved a medical crisis that threatened an entire species." "I provided a solution to a specific problem," Chen replied carefully. "The real heroes are the Thylorian healers who implemented the treatment protocols and the engineers who modified their environmental systems." "Modest," observed Counselor Reefshaw, her aquatic form rippling with what Chen had learned was amusement among her species. "But inaccurate. Our own medical specialists reviewed the case. None of them recognized the connection between environmental UV filtering and developmental biochemistry." Chancellor Vexthar leaned forward in his projection. "This raises interesting questions about human medical capabilities. Your species has been part of the galactic community for only 3 centuries, yet you solved a problem that older, more established species missed." Chen felt the weight of the moment. How he responded might affect humanity's standing in the galactic community for generations to come. "Respectfully, Chancellor, I think you're missing the point," he said. "This wasn't about one species being superior to another. It was about different perspectives leading to different insights. The Thylorian healers knew everything about their own species' biology, but they approached the problem from within their cultural framework. I approached it from outside that framework, with experience from multiple species and environments." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Humans aren't better medics because we're younger or because we're human. We're effective in certain situations because our development as a species forced us to be generalists. We had to learn to adapt to environments we weren't designed for, to work with biology that was constantly challenged by new conditions." "Explain," requested Counselor Nereid, her translated voice carrying curiosity. "Most species develop on their homeworlds and then expand to similar environments," Chen continued. "Humans colonized wildly different worlds out of necessity. We've lived in low-gravity environments, high radiation zones, atmospheric compositions that required constant technological support. Each environment taught us something new about biology and medicine. He gestured toward the Thylorian representatives who were monitoring the communication. The Thylorians are incredibly sophisticated medics within their normal parameters. But this problem fell outside those parameters. It needed someone who had experience with environmental adaptation disorders, someone who had seen what happens when species are forced to live in conditions their biology didn't anticipate. Chancellor Vexthar exchanged glances with other council members. You're suggesting that humanity's chaotic development pattern has created unique medical insights? I'm suggesting that diversity of experience leads to diversity of solutions, Chen replied. Human medicine works because we've had to deal with problems that stable, successful species never face. But there are probably medical challenges that would stump us completely, where species with deeper biological expertise would find easy answers. The council session continued for another hour, with representatives from various species asking detailed questions about human medical practices, training methods, and philosophical approaches to healing. What emerged was a picture of human medicine as uniquely adaptive, but not inherently superior, effective in specific circumstances, but limited in others. When the communication ended, Chen found himself back in the nursery chamber, sitting on the floor, while Vorthak's cubs climbed over him with the fearless curiosity of healthy children. The youngest had taken particular interest in Chen's medical scanner, trying to figure out how it worked. The council seemed impressed, Vorthak observed, settling beside the human medic. They were interested, Chen corrected. There's a difference. I think they're beginning to understand that humans might be useful partners rather than just junior members of the galactic community. Sienna approached, carrying a ceremonial cup made from carved crystal. Dr. Chen, the packs have voted. We would like to offer you something that has never been offered to an outsider. She knelt and presented the cup with both hands. We invite you to become an honorary member of Pack Vorthak. You would have the rights and protections of family, and your own children would be welcome in our territories for all generations. Chen stared at the cup, understanding the magnitude of what was being offered. In Thylorian culture, Pack membership was sacred, extended only to those who had proven themselves through extraordinary service or sacrifice. I'm honored, he said softly, accepting the cup. But I should explain something. Human culture is different from yours. We don't form permanent packs in the same way. Our commitments are often broader, to our entire species or to principles, rather than specific groups. Vorthak's ears pricked forward in interest. What do you mean? I mean that while I'm deeply grateful for this honor, my real commitment is to healing wherever it's needed, Chen explained. Today it was Thylorian cubs. Tomorrow it might be Zephyrite settlers or Naritan colonies. Humans tend to think in terms of universal principles rather than specific loyalties. He looked around the chamber, at the healthy cubs playing and the adults watching with gratitude and affection. But that doesn't make this offer any less meaningful. It makes it more so because you're accepting someone who will always be, in some sense, an outsider. Perhaps that's exactly what we need, Crathan observed. Someone whose loyalty is to healing itself rather than to any particular group. Someone who can see problems we can't see because they're not part of our assumptions. 6 months later, Dr. Chen stood on the observation deck of the research station that had been built in the Kethvar system. The facility was a joint project between humans and Thylorians, designed to study interspecies medicine and develop treatment protocols for cross-cultural medical challenges. The station itself represented something new in galactic relations. Not a human facility or a Thylorian facility, but something created by both species working together as equals. Human adaptability combined with Thylaurian precision had created medical capabilities that neither species could have achieved alone. Through the viewport, Chen could see shuttle traffic moving between the station and Kethavar's surface. Many of those shuttles carried young Thylaurians who were coming to study human medical techniques, while others carried humans learning Thylaurian biological sciences. The exchange had grown beyond simple medical cooperation into a broader cultural partnership. "Regrets?" asked Captain Vasquez, joining him at the viewport. The Ascendant was docked at the station for supply runs and crew rotation. "None," Chen replied, watching a group of mixed human and Thylaurian students working together in one of the laboratory modules. "This is what we're supposed to be doing, not replacing other species' knowledge, but adding to it, creating something larger than what any of us could accomplish alone." His communicator chimed with an incoming message. Another medical emergency, this time from the hegemony frontier where 3 species were struggling with an unknown pathogen. The message specifically requested human medical support, acknowledging that human generalist training might be crucial to solving the crisis. Chen smiled and headed for the shuttle bay. Somewhere in the galaxy, people were sick and needed help. And thanks to what had started with dying Thylaurian cubs, humanity was finally being recognized for what it did best. Finding solutions that others couldn't see, not because humans were superior, but because they approached problems differently. The pack leader's cubs were no longer fading. They were thriving, playing, growing into the next generation of Thylaurian leaders. And in the process, they had helped their species discover something valuable about the young race called humanity, that sometimes the best solutions come from the most unexpected sources. In the end, Chen reflected as his shuttle launched toward the next crisis, that might be humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy. Not superior technology or overwhelming force, but the simple willingness to look at old problems with fresh eyes and the stubborn insistence that every life was worth saving, regardless of species or origin. The universe was vast and full of challenges that would require all of its peoples working together to overcome. Today, at least, one small corner of it was a little bit healthier because a human medic had refused to let children die, even when they weren't human children. It was, Chen thought, a good start.